the message that punishment gives children is you were bad and you deserve to suffer. Whereas restitution is what you did was not okay and you need to make it right. And I'll show you how to make it right. That's a very, very different message.
Welcome to Empowered Kids TV, where we introduce you to the people and ideas to help you take action and create the family of your dreams. Today's guest is an independent scholar in human development, a parent educator, a certified childbirth educator, and a doula. With a career that spans over 4 decades, our guest has helped thousands of childcare professionals and parents shift their mindset, connect more deeply with their kids, and help their kids heal from emotional hurt. For me, our guest today was literally life-changing. Her work shifted the way I saw my kids and the way I saw myself as a parent. She helped me to see my own emotional triggers differently and allowed me to release the pain of some of my childhood beliefs. Because of her, I am a better parent, one that strives to improve every day, that can accept my shortcomings with grace and love. It is my pleasure to introduce you to a woman who was courageous enough to go against the norm and prove that we can raise kids with connection rather than coercion, with love rather than fear. The amazing Pam Leo. Pam, welcome to Empowered Kids TV.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Right, today I want to, I had a hard time trying to work out what to talk to you about because I felt like your book should have been published in underlined text because I underlined just about most of the lines on every page. But today I decided I wanted to zone in on emotions and how do we understand emotions better, our own emotions as well as our kids' emotions. And one of the things that you talk about really beautifully is the concept of emotional discharge. So that's where I wanted to start by asking if you can tell us what that is.
It's actually the release of feelings. You know, when something happens that scares us or hurts us, we get feelings about that and we need to be able to express those feelings. And very often, especially for children, and when we were children, there wasn't the safety to do that. We were told to be a big boy or be a big girl and not to cry and to be brave and that it just wasn't really okay to express those feelings. And the feelings we don't get to express, we store. And they interfere with thinking and they pile up. So discharge is a way of just releasing those feelings and kind of emptying that out so our clear thinking comes back. And it also clears the channel for connection. You know, when children have hurts that are built up, that channel is not open. It's clogged by those hurts that have been stored. So if we want to connect with children, we have to create the safety for them to be able to release those hurts so that that channel for connection is open again.
Wow. Okay. I love that. You talk about 4 main things that we really need to understand about discharge. Can you cover those? So you mentioned one is that we don't really have access to clarity of thought when we're emotionally charged. That was one of them.
So when we have hurts, it affects our thinking. We can't think well until we can release the hurt. So it's kind of like the channel to the brain is clogged as well. So once we can release those hurts. So a great example that I remember from learning this process is, say, you know, a dog frightens a child. If they don't get to cry about that fright, then their thinking is going to be all dogs are bad. And if they get to cry and, you know, shake and tremble and have their feelings about that, then their thinking would be not all dogs are friendly. You know, much more rational thought because they were able to release the fright that happened when the dog frightened them. So that's kind of an example of how it affects our thinking.
You also said that we need attention to discharge. And this one is a bit controversial because I think some parents feel like if you reward kids with your attention when they're crying or they're angry, somehow you're promoting that type of behavior. Let's talk about that a bit.
Okay, let's talk about that because you're right. I have heard that in my classes so many times. And children, the reason children need our attention while they release their hurts, while they cry, is it creates safety. You know, sometimes, did you ever feel like if I ever start crying, I'll never stop?
Yeah.
So overwhelming. And if someone is there to listen to us, it's kind of like an anchor into present time where we can release that, but we know we're not going to be overwhelmed by it. So when we can be that safe place for children to just let them empty out, children do not choose that behavior. That behavior is just overwhelm and overflow. No child would choose that behavior. So if we can say, I hear that you're angry, I hear that you're upset, I'll be with you while you cry, or you can, hit the mad pillow. I'm not going to let you hit me. I'm not going to let you hurt anyone, but you can show me how angry you are. You can pound the clay or rip the newspaper, whatever it takes to let those feelings out in a safe way. And then they do have the safety to just let it go. And I mean, I don't think I know of a parent who has not had the experience that once a child does release, say they have a huge temper tantrum and just cry and scream, and it's huge. And then when it's over, it's like the rainbow after the storm. They're calm, they're loving, it's as if it never happened because they've cleared it all out. And because we were there with them and keeping them safe to do that, now when that channel for connection is open, we're right there to be in that connecting way with them. So, it's not a behavior that we would be rewarding with our attention because it's not a behavior they're choosing. Sometimes they can shut it down if it feels so unsafe, which is often the explanation for why children will be gone all day to preschool or school and come home and, you say, oh, I have graham crackers and apple juice. And they're like, I wanted milk and cookies. It's not about the milk and cookies. It's just the last straw, the final disappointment because they've used up all they had all day, not expressing every little hurt that came along. They just stuffed it and were strong and kept it in, and then they're home where it's safe and a disappointment happens and it's just too much. It's just, even though it's tiny, it feels really big because it's the last one and there's no more room to store it. So it all comes out apparently about the cookie, but it's not about the cookie.
You say that the tears we don't cry out, we cry in, which gives me chills even just to repeat it. And so what I learned from you was that the hurt that we kept in became our buttons or triggers. Let's talk about that a bit more.
Absolutely. So, just when most of us were growing up, because this information is not in the wide world,
yes,
general way that children were responded to when they had upset was to shut them down, to prevent them from crying. And I mean, one of the things that is hard for us to realize is that the crying is the healing. It's not the hurting. If they're crying, a hurt has already happened, and this is how they're healing the hurt. So if we didn't get to do that, it's still in there. It's still in our body. So if children have a cup that they store their tears in, by the time we're an adult, we have a lake. If we store every hurt that came along all the way up through. So when our children start to cry, it triggers that pain. And it's very hard for us to listen to them. It's very hard to be present and listen to them if we have that much stored. So one of the best gifts we can give to our children is to create safe opportunities in our life where we can empty out some of that old stuff so that it's not getting triggered every time our child has an upset. And then we do have some attention that we can give them. And it's interesting. It was kind of okay for little girls to cry, but not to be angry. And it was kind of okay for little boys to be angry, but not to cry. And now adults, we have many angry women walking around who are not allowed to express their feelings, and many men who can't even get near grief or hear crying because they had to stuff every bit that they had. And we can help our children so much if we can work on that old stuff and just clean it out.
I want to explore some of those in a little more detail because I think sometimes on one level, I can hear when I'm in my rational, calm space, I can hear that there's a difference between accepting feelings, and accepting behavior. But as you said, because I've got my own lake of stuffed emotions, there are times when my kids are expressing or they're discharging, and it triggers my my inner pain, and I cannot see the difference between feelings and emotions and behavior. For me, all of it becomes blurred, and I just think I have to stamp out that behavior right away. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
it does. It does.
And do you find that common?
Oh, very common. Yes, I hear it all the time. And that is the time when we have to take a time out for ourselves. And rather than give a child a time out because we can't deal with their behavior, we need to say, I need to take a break right now. And if you have very young children, they're not going to let you leave the room to take a break. So they're just going to follow you. So, if you can just get a grip and even just sit in a chair and just say, I just need to take some deep breaths. I need some time. I need some calm. And, it kind of helps us get to that place where we can say, okay, they're not choosing this behavior. I'm not choosing my behavior. It's feelings on their side. It's feelings on my side. But I'm the grown-up, and I have better ability to say, okay, we can do this. But we need to take that calm space for a minute, because otherwise our recordings are just going to be running because we are just triggered, and whatever is coming up is coming out our mouth. So taking that calm, I think, is really essential.
I think this was really pivotal in understanding this, for me to understand what conflict was in a very different way. So for me, conflict before was about poor communication, not listening, having to repeat myself over and over, or maybe me being tired, and not being it. So it was always just a silo of things that was about somebody else. So it was either about my kids or about myself. But I think when I understood the concept of discharge really deeply, what it helped me to see was conflict was the times when we were both discharging, or all of us discharging at the same time.
Yes. And actually, too, conflict can also be conflict of needs. You have one need and the child has another need, and we're trying to figure out how do we, both get what they need. And so, yes, very often a child starts discharging and we start discharging back, and then you really have conflict. But sometimes the conflict begins because of conflict of needs. So say you need to go to the bank before it closes, and your child is deeply in play, imaginary play, and they don't want to leave. They don't want to go to the bank. So we have conflict of needs because we have lack of resource. There's not grandma or auntie or someone there to say, you go to the bank, I'll be with the children. So then we need to figure out, okay, you need this and I need this. Can we come up with a plan of how we can both get what we need? But just recognizing that it's conflict of need. It's not that one of us is being unreasonable, or, it's just conflict of need, which is usually comes about because of lack of resource.
But it comes back to being able to honor the connection you have in your relationship, and being able to treat kids, no matter what their age, with the same level of respect you would treat anybody else. Because a lot of times we can fall into that space of, well, I'm the parent or I'm the adult, and I said we are going to the bank. So you go get your clothes on and we are going to the bank.
Right. Right. And so when we don't have connection is when we resort to coercion. Right? So if we were to get down on the floor and say, I can see you are having so much fun with what you're doing right now, and we have a conflict because I need to do this, and let's think if we can think of a way, could you bring it in the car with you, and as soon as we honor that what they're doing is just as important to them as what our agenda is, then we have connection. And from connection, we can work. But when we don't have connection, we just resort, like what you said, I am the parent, we will do as I say. So then we resort to coercion. So it's what we use when we don't have connection.
One of the things that I think is really hard when you start to learn more about parenting is that you have to really accept that parenting is not about what you say, but about what you model. And there's no hiding from it or running escape. What you talk about is that the ways that we were shut down as kids tends to be the way we shut down our own kids when we're unconscious. And I just wanted to talk about some of the ways we can shut kids down, because I think sometimes we rationalize the actions from a parenting point of view without recognizing that we're limiting discharge.
Right. So yeah, in fact, if I had my book right in front of me, I think I list 10 different ways that we shut children down, and most of them I can remember. I mean, one of them is we'll often use humor. We'll try to jolly them out of it, of whatever it is they're feeling, and say, oh, did you hurt that driveway, instead of, oh, that hurt me. Or we can guilt them out of it. We can say, oh, wow, when I was a child, you've got it good compared to what I got,
I put my hand up for that one, Pam.
Yeah. Invalidating them and being like, oh, that's not a big deal. You're making a big deal out of nothing. So actually, they all kind of fall under invalidation of feelings, that what you're expressing, isn't valid, that you're being a baby, or you're being a sissy, or you just, aren't, buck up, just get with the program. So, all those ways that we interfere with children, they can kind of come under one category of just, of just invalidating instead of accepting. And if there's whatever it is they're telling us, that's how it feels to them. No person anywhere can know what it feels like to be inside of someone else's body. So we can't possibly tell someone they do or do not have a reason to cry, because we don't know that. And it comes back to what you said earlier. It comes back to respecting them, giving them the same respect we would expect. And I think that is just so pivotal to connection parenting, because you can't do connection parenting without it. You really can't.
When I think back to my old childhood experiences, and even just, so I grew up in the Caribbean, and so there was a lot of interaction between families. So when I grew up, there was really still a village raising kids, but there was not connection in the way that I've now grown to understand what connection was. So we had sayings like, why are you crying? Would you like something to cry for?
Oh, yeah. We have that here too. I'll give you something to cry about.
So, and there was a lot of shaming. You're a cry baby. So apart from invalidating the feelings, there was shame, there was threatening. There was like almost sometimes, I think some parents move in the opposite direction. I don't want to threaten you, but I'll just fix it.
I'll fix it bigger. Because if I can fix it, you will stop, and then my pain will stop. Yes, fix is probably, I think threatening and fixing are probably, and then validating, that would be the top three. And fixing it, I mean, it comes across like you're being this really wonderful, loving, caring person, and you are, and it also shuts it down. It's like, oh, my cookie broke, I'll get you a new one, instead of like, that makes you really sad your cookie broke, and let's stay with the broken cookie for long enough for them to have those feelings, because it's not about the cookie anyway. But the minute we try to offer them a new cookie, they'll no, I want that one, but I want it not to be broken. That's when it will appear that children are being unreasonable, because they're trying to stay with releasing that hurt, and we're trying to pull them away from it by fixing it. Yeah.
There's also one that you talk about that is really close to my heart, and it's isolation. And the reason this is close to me is that when I started my parenting journey, I started from a very disconnected place. I read all the books in the library, but they all said put my kids in a naughty corner. And I was an expert at it. I followed it to a T. And my youngest son, he probably sat in the naughty corner maybe once or twice before I found out that that's not the way I wanted to go. And if you think he was at the age of 2, he sat for about 2 minutes. But he remembers. And his recollection is that I left him all night long. And no matter what I say, that's what it feels like to him. And now, years and years later, I'll observe when he's really, really upset, he isolates himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that hurts because I can see that as a product of me isolating him. So now I ask respectfully if it's okay for me to join him in whatever space he's decided to put himself in. And I sit with him if he allows me to. But there are times when he just needs that space.
I was just going to say, I think you just also hit upon something where you can let yourself off the hook a little bit, because there are introvert children and extrovert children. And it sounds very much, and I'm an introvert. And when I'm hurt, I want to be alone. I want to process it myself, and then I want some comfort. But if someone tries to come in too soon, I can't process it. I just need time alone. So, possibly it was a little influenced by that, brief little time out, but I make that the whole thing. I would say it probably has more to do with his introvertedness and how he processes things. In Mary Sheedy Krasinka's book that I love, Raising Your Spirited Child, she talks about introvert in extrovert both in a different way than I've ever heard it talked about before. She said, introverts get renewed from time alone, and extroverts get renewed from time with people. And so I have a granddaughter who's very much an introvert, and being in school all day is hard for her because she never gets alone time. So when she gets home, she just wants to putter and just do her own thing for a while. So knowing about our children, I think, is essential information. Are they introvert? Are they extrovert? And knowing that about ourselves as well. And also there are external processors and there are internal processors. Introverts tend to be internal processors. Like, we're going to think about something long and hard before we say it. But external processors think by talking, so they don't have great filters. Thinking comes right out their mouth. So just knowing which we are, which each of our children are, that's important.
I love it. And the last one we had in terms of the way we shut kids down is ignoring. And this one I wanted to touch on again, because a lot of parents think if I give you attention at this point in time, you're going to repeat this behavior. So let's just touch on that a bit more, because I think we still need some support, Pam, in terms of being able to identify that crying and feeling angry. So feeling sad and feeling angry or feeling frustrated is not the same as how we behave, and that as parents, we absolutely have the opportunity to guide our kids to positive behavior in terms of how they express their feelings, but we should accept and allow all.
That's wonderful. You've nailed it right there perfectly. No, seriously, you did. You have the most incredible understanding of connection parenting.
I've studied your work, Pam.
So, when we can give children language and also modeling that to say, oh, I'm really frustrated. Oh, I'm so disappointed that didn't work out. So modeling, giving them language by how we express our own feelings is one tool that we can give them. And, to say, oh, I am just so angry. I think I am just going to pound on something. I just am frustrated. Then it gives it a direction. It gives them a model. It's like, oh, that's what you do when you're angry. But, if you swear and slam the cupboard door, they're going to say, oh, that's how you do it. But they're going to swear and slam the cupboard door. So we need to be mindful of what we are modeling and how we express our own emotions, because they're watching us all the time. And they don't always do what we tell them, but they always do what we do.
Sadly. I want to talk about what's the result of not allowing kids to discharge, but both for kids and for adults, so that we could understand ourselves better. So when we stuff those feelings in, and as you said, we cry in if we don't cry out, what happens over time?
We have a very narrow margin of frustration because the cup is just full all the time. It doesn't take much to set us off. Yep, to make it spill over. So, that's one. And also we have very limited ability to listen to a child's feelings because our own are still so full and big that it gets triggered. If they're going to cry or if they're going to be angry, it's going to trigger our tears and our anger. So it doesn't give us any chance to respond well to their feelings. So that happens to adults. And for children, it starts to build their lake. If we're not letting them empty out the cup, then they're going to need more and more space. And the smaller they are, the smaller their cup is. They have less ability to store, which is why younger children melt down more often and quickly than as they get a little older.
What I love about that is that you said before that out of control is the same as out of milk. It's and for me, out of control with dirty words before. They were like, you are out of control. But now when you say out of milk, I think, well, you're out.
Don't have any left. I have none left. I've used it all up. So like a child will come home from school. They've probably used all the control a 6-year-old has it being in school all day with no recharge from connecting with someone they have connection with. So they come home, some disappointment happens. No, we're not having the play date. Boom. And then we feel they're out of control. And they are fresh out. Have no more.
Fresh out. Right. I want to talk about coping mechanisms. So how are coping mechanisms linked to stuffing our feelings in and not having the opportunity to discharge?
So when we realize that it's not safe to have our feelings, then, like when you have to go pee and there's no bathroom and you do the dance, that's a coping mechanism. In school and something hurts your feelings, you might chew your fingernails, you might twirl your hair, you might chew on your shirt. There are all these ways that children have of stuffing it. And that's really what it is. It's just a way to not let those feelings out and just keep it in. But, I know it's funny, but to say when you can't get to the bathroom, but I mean, that is a coping mechanism, when you can't let it out, you've got to keep it in, you've got to do something to keep it in. So whether it's the dance or, crossing your legs, whatever it takes, it's the same kind of thing.
So as parents, we could be more helpful, I think, if we're observant to what our kids are doing to cope. Probably then sit to figure out, okay, how do I help them release? Is that what you would advise?
It is. And it's interesting when I talk about special time. And when I was thinking about us having our conversation today, one of the thoughts that went through my mind is that connection time daily is even more important than it was when I wrote the book, because with all of our screens and all of the ways that we cannot be present, even if we're all sitting in the living room, all on our screens, we're not connecting. So intentionally making that connection time is so critical. And so oftentimes when we do make connection time, there will end up being a tantrum. And we're thinking, oh, great, I carved out this time. I tried to make it special, and this is the thanks I get for it. Well, actually, what has happened is I've made it really safe by connecting with you. And there's stuff sitting there, and now is when it's going to come out. So we always have to go into special time knowing that that could be one of the results. And that's not a bad result. It might not fit our, picture of a happy time together, but it does fit the picture of connection, because once they can be with us and let those feelings go, 2 minutes of sweetness is just wonderful if it took 8 minutes of discharge to get to that 2 minutes of sweetness, so it really is not a negative outcome of special time together. It's just saying. But the other thing on that same note, I'm interrupting myself, but it made me think, we also need to question the environments our children are being in. Are they coming home with so much stored up? Then that tells you that they have been enduring frustration and they have been enduring hurt. And so we just need to, I always tell parents, just because we place our children in, school or childcare or whatever, it doesn't mean we're not still responsible for that environment. We are. and to check it out and say, okay, what's happening here? And it's different for every child. It is harder for introverted children to be in a group setting all day long, whatever that setting is. And just knowing that, just like it would be difficult for an extrovert to be isolated all day long. So just knowing that about our children and making sure we're on top of whatever environment they're in, I think it also is an important part of that in terms of them coping, because are they coping with too much? So when we see their nails fitting down to the quick, or their shirt is soaking wet when they get home because they've been chewing it, then something, they're having to keep in a lot of feelings if that's happening. And
It's such a mental shift, Pam, because those things before for me were bad habits. You have a bad habit of biting your nails.
Mm-hmm.
There was no sort of curiosity to look behind why you're biting your nails. It's just, that's a bad habit. Cut it out. Right?
Let me paint your nails with nasty tasting stuff.
Yes. And you can trace that all the way back to from baby. So as a baby, as they started to soothe themselves, we put mittens on, I put aloe vera on their fingers. Don't put your hands in your mouth. Never thinking that there's some requirement for extra soothing, that we need to find out what's behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk more, Pam, about how do we facilitate discharge. So we talked about doing one-on-one time, and I think what was important there for me was a recognition that I can't schedule one time when I'm exhausted. It can't just be at the end of the day when I'm tapped out and this is my last bit of energy before I get to bed.
My last gasp. Yeah.
Yes. We gotta have some in the tank. Are there other things that we could do to really facilitate discharge?
Well, definitely, like you said, having it earlier in the day. And it's funny, I was also thinking about that, about one of the best ways I know of connecting with a child or reconnecting with a child after there's been a separation, whether it's a day or a week or whatever it is reading together.
Mm.
And I thought, well, people often read at bedtime, but it needs to be a different story time than the bedtime story. Like you say, earlier in the day when you're not just waiting for them to fall asleep so you can have 2 seconds to yourself. So, say when you come back together at the end of the day, even, maybe while dinner's cooking or something like that, to just have family read aloud time where you're gathering at the same spot. It's kind of like you're gathering at the same table. If you could think of a book as a table, like we're all partaking of this story. And it is a very connecting thing. So definitely. And I mean, we have to be super flexible about how we're going to do special time. One day it might be in the morning. One parent told me that what they do is when they go in the morning, they have a story before they even get out of bed. But but you have to schedule that time in. And I mean, one of the things it's come across as memes and different things I've seen by me that I didn't put out there, that and it's a quote from my book, that it takes the same amount of time and attention to meet a child's emotional needs as it does to deal with the behaviors caused by the unmet emotional needs. Either way, we're going to spend the time, and I'd rather spend my time having fun with them than I would dealing with a lot of hurt feelings. So if we say, okay, we got to be out the door at this time, and this is going to, we're going to get up 5 minutes earlier, and I'm just going to go right into their bed and say, good morning, sleepyhead, and just do a story, start the day right out on connection. Mm-hmm. Because they know, if I put on my shoes, if I get dressed, if I eat my breakfast, we're one step closer to out the door, and I have no chance for connection. Yeah. Why would I cooperate with that? Why would I do that? The same at bedtime. If their cup is still empty at bedtime, this is their last chance. Speaking of the last gasp, this is their last chance to get some connection. Yes. So, we don't want them going to bed with an empty emotional cup. They're going to resist and resist and resist. When they can just lay back and fall asleep, that tells us that their cup is in good shape.
Yeah, and usually what I found was, because for a lot of years our connection time was that bedtime. Mm-hmm. And usually what I find is, I have to tell you one more thing, Mommy. I need some more water. I'm really hungry. because it's the time of the day where they actually get in the connect and they don't want it to end.
Yes.
So I think an earlier spot in the afternoon before we get to bedtime, we'll help empty that cup a bit so that bedtime's a little easier for us.
Right. So that people aren't confused. So we want to empty the hurts cup, but we want to fill the love cup.
Yes.
And we end up, the hurts cup ends up emptying because we've filled the love cup a little bit and made it safe. So they need both of those things. And that's when we have to make sure that we're scheduling that time every day. And even if it can't be 10 minutes, if it can be 5 minutes where they have our undivided attention, doing something fun, silly, that they want to do. I mean, an example I gave a friend the other day, I said, say you had a friend who said, I'm going to call you every week and I'm going to listen to you for 10 minutes and you just get to talk about whatever is good for you, hard for you. I'm going to do that for you every week. Can you imagine how much of a priority you would feel to that friend? And so if our children get the message, I'm going to make this time for you every day because they watch us. They know what we love. If we, if that's what we're spending our time on, that's what we love. And if we're not spending our time on them, the inference is I'm not that important.
Mm-hmm.
And so why do they want to, release their feelings or trust? And I mean, trust is such a huge part of connection.
I want to just dive into one of the famous ways to discharge, which is tantrums.
Okay, go for it.
And I want to just talk about what's the difference between a normal discharge of emotions and a full blown out tantrum, irrespective of what age our child's at.
I'd say there's two differences. I would call a tantrum is when the cup is just completely full and it's spilling over. Also, children are different in how they express themselves, just like they are different in their personalities. So some children might just curl up on your shoulder and sob and sob. And it also depends on what's in the cup. If it's anger, they're not going to just sob and sob. They're mad. They want to do something, hit something. So, it depends on, what's in there and their personality. I think that combination of things. So the sweetest, gentlest child could still have a raging tantrum because they've been hurt. They have lost dignity, or they've got stuff sitting there that is really upsetting for them. And being able to be with a child when they're having a tantrum is probably one of the most challenging things we face as parents because of our own lack of discharge. We weren't allowed to do that. And, depending if a lot of what we have stuffed is anger, being confronted by a child's anger is going to trigger that anger. And we're going to feel angry that they're having a temper tantrum. Then we won't consciously think, well, I was never allowed to have a temper tantrum. Yeah. But that anger that got stuffed is going to rear up. It definitely is. I heard this wonderful story once that and I can't find it anywhere. I have Googled it to death and I can't find it. It was many, many, many years ago. But the story was every child has a sleeping dragon inside of them, and it stays asleep until someone is disrespectful or hurtful to that child, and then it will come roaring out to defend it. Wow. And I love that so much, and I would love to, where I did if I could ever find it. But it just, to me, illustrates that so well, that, the dragon will stay asleep as long as we're loving and kind and respectful. But its job is to protect them from people who are not being loving and kind and respectful to them.
You talked about two things that I want to touch on. The first is how difficult it is to sit with our kids when they're having a tantrum. And what I found as a parent is that it is so much easier to sit with someone else's child when True. I am the best parent when it's someone else's child. I am calm. I am available. I'm the safe space. When it's my child, I get really triggered. What is causing the difference?
I think because we take it personally. Like if I was being a good parent, if I was meeting all their needs, if I was being a good role model, if I was doing all those things, my child wouldn't be having these feelings, which is so totally not true. But that's how it feels to us. So it is very personal when it's our child. So I think that's really what's going on, because you're right. When it was daycare children, when I did family daycare, I could listen to them forever, but so much harder when it was my own children, so much harder.
The second thing I want to talk about is, what do we do if we've built up a culture in our home where we didn't allow discharge? So we're 10 years into being a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So we now have an established way of being. And the way of being is, you don't cry because you have nothing to cry for. You should be grateful for all that you have. You know how many kids don't have what you have? And how dare you be angry? How dare you be angry? Who are you angry at, right? So we've got that culture going. How do we begin to turn that around?
It requires some incredible honesty. And I've had that question from parents of older children in my classes many times. And seriously, it takes sitting down with them and saying, you know what, we're all learning all the time. And I've learned some new things about what human beings are like and what feelings are like. And I'm not happy with the way I have handled some things, and it was the best I knew and the best I could do at the time, but I'm going to be working hard to make some changes. And this is what I'm going to be shooting for. This is what I'm going to try to do, and I'm going to fall short sometimes, and you have my permission to remind me. You have my permission. It takes a lot of courage to change a family culture, but that's really what it requires, is to give our children permission to cover their ears if we start to yell. I mean, boy, that will, one minute we see a child cover their ears, we know we're throwing it down. But we need to give them permission to do that because of the culture that has existed prior to that, for sure.
And I think there's no accountability like accountability from your kids.
In fact, I will tell you, one of the things that I pride myself on, because it's also available as an audiobook, I tell parents there is not one word I say in this book that it would matter if your child heard it. If you're listening to it as a CD in the car and they're in the back seat, but be prepared for the fact that, didn't that lady say, Mom, that? So, you totally can let them hear it. But like you say, it will definitely up the bar of accountability if they do.
Sorry, Pam.
Oh, I said it might be a good idea if we let them listen with us.
I love it. I wanted to round that off with talking about how we learn, because I think a lot of times as parents, we can get new information, so we have a new level of awareness, and then we expect somehow we're going to have a switch. And tomorrow, all of this is going to be fixed tomorrow. And as we fall short, we then pick up a bag of guilt. I should have done it this way, and I should have done it that way. Let's talk more about that.
That is what a friend of mine in parenting, a colleague, talks about, parenting in the gap. That there will always be a gap between the new things we learn and the parenting we aspire to and what we can actually do at any given moment, and that we're going to have to accept. Scott Noel wrote a great article about that, of living in the gap. And I think that's where rewind, repair, replay that I talk about in the book comes in. If we didn't have that, I think that connection parenting would be an even harder road to go down than people find it to be. If the minute those words come out of our mouth, if we can say, whoa, that wasn't respectful, or that wasn't kind, I need a do-over, please forgive me for being disrespectful, this is what I really want to say. Because all those recordings that we carry, all those things that we recorded, those messages as children, are just sitting in there. When our buttons get pushed, that is what is going to play, and we are not always going to be able to catch it before it gets out there. And so we got to reel it back somehow And that's, I mean, rewind kind of dates me because when we had the old videos and you would rewind them and, let's go back and start over. And, one of the precious things I think about doing that is that we are modeling it. So then children know that they can rewind. If they say something, unkind or hurtful, they can say, oh, that was unkind or that was hurtful. I want to go back and do it over in a more loving way. So, we model that for them when we're willing to do that. And it also takes a little of the pressure off us to feel like we have to be perfect all the time. We're not going to be perfect all the time. And it gives children like, oh, nothing bad's going to happen if I'm less than perfect. I can have a do-over. And it reminds me too of the whole idea of restitution instead of punishment. The message that punishment gives children is you were bad and you deserve to suffer. Whereas restitution is what you did was not okay and you need to make it right. And I'll show you how to make it right. That's a very, very different message.
So much more powerful though, because really it says to a child, you have a chance to change your relationship, change the course of your relationship, and also change the way I think kids see themselves in a very powerful way.
Yes, like I'm not bad. That wasn't really behavior, but I am not bad. I made a bad choice perhaps, but I can go back and make it different. And I mean, I think that message needs to be everywhere that, that punishment is, well, that's a bigger conversation. It can start in the home. It can start there that, you have a chance to make it right.
I want to tell you the impact on my family of following connected parenting. And a lot of times people can fall into the trap to say she has a parenting show. She's done X number of years of research, so she must be an awesome parent. And I have my awesome moments and I have my moments when I am not awesome. But I think the biggest reward for me is that my kids now look beyond my behavior. So in the moments when I am not tuned into myself and I'm running around in a frenzy, and one of the triggers for me is when I'm disorganized and we're late, I get really snappy. And my kids will kind of take a step back and go, whoa, Mom, you're getting a little grouchy there. Maybe you need some rest, Mom. But no longer is it a personal attack where, why are you speaking to me like that, Mom? Now they can see beyond my behavior because I take the time to see beyond theirs. And for me, that's one of the greatest gifts that you've given to my family.
I'm so happy to hear that. And that is a high compliment to you that they can do that because that's what you've taught them. That's what you've taught them by how you have treated them.
I'm trying to model. I get it maybe 10 minutes every day. Pam, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation filled with nuggets that I think can really begin the process for many parents to see themselves and the interaction they have with their kids very differently. And I can't thank you enough for joining us.
And it's been totally my joy. You have been a joy.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Empowered Kids TV. If this is your first time with us, be sure to subscribe and press the bell icon so we can notify you of upcoming episodes. And remember to share the love. Share this episode with your family and friends. As we always say in this village, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.